Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Actually, Nepal is very special to me. When I was an entrepreneur, the first startup I was running is an English learning website. And we were acquired by a newspaper group, and later we published newspaper about English learning. And the first contribution writer that we brought in, he wrote the first letter, the first article, which is about Nepal. And that's why Nepal always in my mind, and I'm very curious about this country. And when Caffeine invited me to come here, I'm so excited to learn that Nepal's startup ecosystem has grown so well, and the event has attracted more than 3,000 people coming to this country to share about entrepreneurship. So I have a slide that I want to share. So before I become an investor, I was an entrepreneur for 17 years. And one of the reasons why I want to become an entrepreneur again and again is because when I work for a company, compared to when I am running my own startup, there's a very big difference. I found that when you are working on your own idea, it opens up all your senses. You become so sensitive to everything. You become so passionate for everything. You want to learn, you want to laser focus, to work out, and to conquer all the obstacles. And this is the biggest difference why entrepreneurs want to be entrepreneur and want to run on your own startup, your own idea. And when I become an investor, I find that, because I was an entrepreneur before, I'm very used to have a lot of ideas. And when I become an investor in the very beginning, I have too much idea. And so I keep sharing my own idea to founder. But I found that, idea ownership is very important. So when I learned to be an investor, I start to respect the idea ownership of the founder. I start to let the founder to own their idea, to work on idea by themselves, and I become a facilitator. So that's one of the reasons why I focus on facilitating the founder, give them feedback, give them questions to challenge their idea and to challenge their strategy so that they can fine-tune what they are doing step by step. And apart from that, I also find that apart from give them challenge idea, it's very good for me to provide them connections as well. And that's why the first time when I start to give some connection to my portfolio company, I find it's very helpful for them. And that's one of the reasons I start to travel around the world to meet other inspirational speakers and key players in different countries to collect these global connections for our portfolio company and also for the startup that we are supporting. And through this global network, we are able to support our portfolio company even further. And where is my PowerPoint, by the way? Okay, so apart from being a founder myself, I was also a tech columnist when I was running my own startup. One of the reasons why I start to write articles is because I found that, when you're running on your own startup, you laser focus on all the operation within your startup. You laser focus on your own business model. But I am very curious about other business models that are enabled by the new technology. And I want to learn, I want to get the exposure. And that's why I start to write articles as a process for me to learn and get exposure. And fast forward, I spent 17 years running my own startup and also writing about internet business model and internet marketing strategy as a columnist. And 6 years ago, when I exit my own startup, okay, so the PowerPoint is still not up yet. So when I become an investor, I just mentioned about idea ownership is very important, and I challenge my portfolio, my startup, using question to fine-tune their model. Because you know what? Most of the investor actually does not expect your original idea or your original plan, we call it plan A, will work out. We don't expect that. Usually, what we expect is whether you have the ability to evaluate your business model, evaluate your traction, set up the relevant KPI, we call it key performance indicator, and then you fine-tune your strategy along the way. And so, through this process, we call it iteration. If you have the ability to iterate, then you have the ability to keep fine-tuning your business model. And that's what we really value as an investor, not that you tell me that you have the best business model right away in day one. It's a process, whether you know how to fine-tune your model and also how you learn along the way, how you can keep learning and learn faster than anybody else. So for ourselves, we are also a fund entrepreneur ourselves. After being an entrepreneur in a startup, we set up our VC fund. We also learn along the way, fine-tune our own business model and our own process. And throughout this process, we are able to generate very consistent, top-performing results. And this is one of the reasons why I want to share with you how we evaluate the startup and how we pick the best startup. What is the characteristic of their business model, their strategy, and the characteristic of these founders. So this is one of the poems written by my daughter. She was 8 years old when she wrote this poem. So she talked about crayons here, crayons there, crayons everywhere. Messing around, learn a lesson, messy ones. So entrepreneurship is actually a journey about you learn a lesson throughout the journey. It's not about you can make it, you can be successful in day one. And so in the whole journey, you find that one of the things that you always face is rejection. And how to handle the rejection effectively is very important. And I want to share one of my childhood story, how I handled the rejection. When I was 11 years old, one day, after visit my friend, they just renovate their home. And I am, very curious about, if I can also renovate my own home, it would be great. So I went back to my father. I asked my father, Father, can I renovate our house? I'm not asking my father to renovate our house. I'm asking my father whether I can renovate our house. And at that time, of course, my father rejected me, right? I'm just 11 years old. It's like a crazy idea for a 11 years old. But after the rejection, somehow I didn't give up. I went to my bank account, I checked how much money I have. At that time, I didn't know about investor. I don't know I can try to get an investor. So I just look at my own bank account. I found that I have some money inside. And then I go to the renovation shop to ask the people how to renovate a house, how much I need. I did some research, and I go back to my father, telling him all the research that I have done, and I tell him that I have enough money to self-fund the project. And my father, amazingly, gave me a chance to do it. And so I used my own money to carry on the project all by myself. And when I start to paint the wall, I learned that before you put on the new layer, you need to remove the old paint. So I remove all the old paint, and I try to put on the new paint. Throughout the whole process, I found that it's easy. It's easier to do it in the kitchen. You can remove the old paint easily and put on the new paint, no problem. But when I go to the living room, I found that it's much more difficult to remove the old paint in the living room. So the original plan A didn't work out so well in the living room. And I fine-tuned the target a little bit from plan A. I go to plan B. I design a feature wall. So I remove the old paint in a feature wall and replace one wall so that it becomes a feature wall in the living room. And so throughout the whole process, I found that sometimes your original plan A doesn't work. You need to fine-tune your business model or your strategy, and you need to come up with a plan B. So this is my experience as a 11 years old, how I faced the rejection and how I, through the research and study and learning, to get an opportunity for what I want to do. So this is one of the attributes that I look at entrepreneur when now I become an investor. It's the determination, and it's also how fast you learn. You know, investor actually can know how fast you learn by asking you questions. Just 1 hour will be enough. By asking you questions within 1 hour, we would know how fast you can learn. Because what you learn, what you know already is not the most important. How fast you can learn is even more important than what you know already. And knowing what you are doing is the third very important attribute that we as an investor is exploring. Because if you don't have enough knowledge in what you are trying to do, it is not very effective. Another story, personal story I want to share is when I was in university, year 2. I traveled in China alone. At that time, I need to cut my hair and dress like a boy. Traveling alone in China is not easy as a female. At that time, it was like 20 years ago. And I want to bring up this point is because globally, we know that female entrepreneurship is not a big population at the moment. So we want to nurture and promote more female role model so that female entrepreneur and even female investor can step up and take the action. And I'm very happy that today, after 20 years, according to a study from C-Trip, 60% of the solo traveler in China nowadays is actually female. So female are more independent now. And we foresee that in the near future, there will be more and more female entrepreneurs and female investors stepping up. So this is one of the photos that when I was traveling in China, I went to Thai Mountain. Thai Mountain actually has 7,000 steps. And at that time, I was walking along the step from the bottom to the top. I didn't take any transportation to go to the top. And along the way, I saw this. and I took a picture. And this is how they build the sky street in the top of the mountain. So you can see that entrepreneurship is actually just like this photo, how you can lead a team of people united with the same goal, and you go from the bottom step by step to the top. So this photo is really inspiring for me. Okay, so today, apart from sharing my personal story as an entrepreneur, I also want to share, I just mentioned, by asking questions to the entrepreneur, investor can already understand a lot about the entrepreneur and the founding team. So I share some of the questions that I always ask my entrepreneur. And I will tell you why I ask these questions. So one of the questions I always ask is, what is your traction? Every year, I receive more than 1,000 deals. We call it deals. 1,000 entrepreneurs send email to my email account directly and asking for an opportunity for an interview, for a meeting. But I found that up to this moment, most of the entrepreneurs in their email, they cannot tell me what is their traction. Why this is so important? Because understand your own traction show that first, you know how to set up your own KPI, your key performance indicator. With the KPI, you could have your whole team have a unified vision, unified target. What is your target? What you need to work hard on. So having the target KPI and then knowing how to measure your KPI and knowing your own traction is very important. It reflects, you know how to play the game. And that's why most of the time, if there is an email from a founder to my inbox, if within the email, they can give you their traction data, how long they have been running the startup, what they have achieved with the traction data, no matter how small it is. It could be just a very small figure. I have run my own startup for 6 months, and this is what I have achieved. And why and how? If an entrepreneur can do that, it already catch my attention. Imagine every year we have more than 1,000 company going to our inbox, our email. Every email we can only spend a few seconds or up to 10 to 20 seconds. So this traction data is very important to reflect you know how to play the game. And another question I always ask is your business model. So business model is very important. I'm not saying that you are going to have the same business model throughout the coming 10 years. I'm talking about you need to have the initial business model in day one. And this is very important because, first of all, the business model help you to set up your own KPI, help you to set up your target, your mission, and your vision. And through this, you could have a set of startup metrics, and you could measure these startup metrics and iterate your own business model. So that's why business model is the second question I always ask. And within the business model, a lot of the startup, they will have a business model about how they acquire the revenue, how they make profit. But actually, this is not the most important part because we know that as an early stage investor, you may not make a lot of profit in day one. You may not make a lot of revenue in day one. So revenue and profit is not the most important thing. The most important thing is you understand what kind of scalable asset you are trying to acquire. And this scalable asset is something that helps you to set up a barrier for future competitors. And this is something that people from the outside wouldn't understand. They may think, oh, you are just trying to make revenue from this direction. But actually, you are accumulating something, make your own business model defensible, that only your team understand. So this is, I always call, asset, belongs to your business model, and you need to be very sure. To give you some solid example, we have the earlier speaker talk about Facebook, right? Imagine Facebook, everybody understand is a social media. But before Facebook, we have Friendster, and then we have MySpace. And Facebook is not the earliest. Then why Facebook win? Why Friendster and MySpace didn't work out? Because if you look deeply, Facebook is acquiring a very scalable asset that MySpace and Friendster, they didn't work on. Facebook, apart from storing all our memories, our photos, our sharing, one of the most scalable assets that they are acquiring is the real name network around us, our friends network with real name. So if you look back in the Facebook time, before Facebook, most of the business model around MySpace or even Friendster, it's not about real name. You can have a virtual name. And then you start to build your sharing around your virtual name. But Facebook is the first model that's trying to acquire your friends network, a real name network around you. And that's why this network is so scalable and it becomes the asset of Facebook. And how they capitalize on this asset is the next step when they open up their platform through this through this friendship network. So you can see when they open up their platform, they allow third party to build applications on top of Facebook and tap into this friends network. So you can see the social game that built on the Facebook at that time is about friends playing game with each other, right? So the friendship network is what Facebook is building. And the other example, if you look at Twitter, Twitter is building a different network. We already have Facebook building the friendship network. So what else can we build for Twitter? If you look deeply, they are building a common interest network. So you don't need to have a real name. You don't need to have your friends network inside Twitter, but you have common interests. You can follow somebody. But in Facebook, when you connect somebody, you need to get approval. So it's a two-way network that you are building. But in Twitter, it's one-way network. As long as you share the common interest, you can follow. But you don't need to get approval from the host. You can follow with one way. So this is a very different network that Twitter is building. So if you are a tech entrepreneur, looking into your own business model, understand what kind of scalable asset that you are building is very important. The second keyword that I mentioned, scalable, why it is so important is because with a tech-enabled business model, you could be very scalable. You could leverage the network effect of internet to scale up your business. And that's why business model like Facebook, Twitter, they can be global within so short of time. They can be so scalable. And there's other question that I ask the entrepreneur. Another question is, what is your product and marketing strategy? And why I ask this question is because, if you look at the difference between traditional business model and internet-enabled business model, one of the biggest difference is the scalability. For the traditional business model, because when they set up that model, they are not laser focused for the network effect and the scalability. And that's why, when they try to expand the business, there's a lot of bottleneck that stop them from leveraging the internet. But the tech-enabled business model, one of the biggest difference is because the whole model is set up laser focused on leveraging the network effect of internet. And that's why when you have the marketing strategy of your tech-enabled business model, it's very different. It's much more scalable and it's easy to measure. So we call it, sometimes we call it growth hacking. You can use growth hacking strategy to scale up your business much easier because everything, when you build your model around internet, everything is measurable. So you can do A/B testing. You can measure through understanding what kind of metrics you are measuring, and you understand what channel that is the best performing channel. So if you look at a lot of our entrepreneur, our portfolio company, and even friends around us, when they do the growth hacking, the marketing strategy, sometimes they measure around 100 different channels. 100 different channels. And they also build a pipeline of another 100 channels. And every week, they measure who is the best performing channel, who is the worst, and they change blood. They replace the worst performing channel with the new channel, and they keep doing this iteration again and again. So this is about discipline. You know how to measure, and you have a discipline to evaluate your channel using your data and keep fine-tuning. So this is the product and the marketing strategy is something that is so important in a tech-enabled business model. So some of the other questions that I asked our portfolio company is about the cap table. Why I want to share the cap table? Because, the same situation happened in Hong Kong 6 years ago. When an entrepreneur start their own business, they have a pretty good traction and they are ready to raise outside money. When they pitch to potential investor, some of them encounter some investor that are trying to get 50% of the share in a very early stage. This is something we need to be careful because if you are going through the tech startup route, you need to be able to reserve enough shares for your future fundraising. And that's why for each round of your fundraising, you reserve around 20% for the investor from that round. If you have too big dilution, more than 30% in the very early stage, then you may not have enough shares for the future fundraising. So this is another knowledge which is very important for a tech entrepreneur. And that's why one of the questions we always ask about is the cap table, whether they still have enough shares for future fundraising, and also whether the funding team at the moment have enough incentive in the company, have enough controlling share in the company. And one more thing is very important is whether you have reserved an option pool for your key employee and for your founding team members to help you to build the company together. So this is some knowledge around the cap table area. So I can go on and on with these questions, but I want to share some of these important questions. And if you are interested, I can upload my PowerPoint with all these questions I always ask my founder, and you can have a look in detail later. So what I want to share today is entrepreneurship is actually a journey. Instead of the success is not the final point. The journey is actually your target, because what you have learned throughout the journey is something that you can remember in the future. It's not the moment when you are successful. It's what you have gone through throughout the whole journey. And this is my sharing today. Thank you very much.